Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to this DevOps.com program brought to you by Techstrong. My name is Cody J. Brown, the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting program ahead. First, I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. So today's session is being recorded. If you miss any of our discussion, or maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, and for this panel, we really hope that you do, we want you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. There'll be a few other options on the right side of the screen, the most important one being the chat tab. We're going to be trying to engage with you throughout there during today's program, so please do at least let us know where you're tuning in. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around for the duration of today's program. So our title today is How Do I Get Started and Succeed at Digital Transformation? And I am joined by a panel consisting of Mitch Ashley, CTO of Techstrong Group and Principal at Techstrong Research, Kaylee Van Devoorde, Software Engineer at Change Healthcare, Donald Lutz, Senior Cloud and Software Architect at Taos, Robert Field, Director of Duffel Bag Consulting, and Bob Davis, CMO at Plutora. So to everyone who's joining us today, thank you both. Thank you all so much. Mitch, do you want to go ahead and get this conversation kicked off?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much, Cody, and thank you, panelists, for joining us. We do have a great panel. I'm excited about both the topic and the perspectives that our panel are bringing today. And that's one of the things that we try to do in our roundtables is bring some diverse experiences, perspectives, kind of tackle a topic together, see what areas we agree, maybe we have some disagreements, and share some ideas and experiences. But it's not just us. We would love for you to, the audience, to engage with us through chat. You'll find on the interface of our webinar software, our platform here, just a real simple chat program. You'll see us as panelists commenting in there, maybe asking a question or two, or carrying on a parallel dialogue, if you will. You can comment about what the panel's talking about. You can throw in something about your own experience, all of those things. So I highly encourage you to do that. And it just kind of increases the dialogue and the learning for all of us. So my name is Mitch Ashley, as Cody said, and I'm CTO with Techstrong Group, which is the organization putting on today's roundtable. And I run all the infrastructure and background, all the technology we use for our business. And I'm also an analyst, and I started our analyst firm, Techstrong Research. So enjoy working with a lot of good companies in our industry. Our topic today is how do I get started and succeed at digital transformation? We picked this as a topic because it's so easy to say, we need to do this too. We need a digital transformation project. We all kind of rush to do something, and then we find out, oh, maybe we didn't approach this quite the best way. There's some learnings we could pick from other people, and that's what we're going to pick apart. And we're also taking, adding to that conversation, the topic of value stream and how that fits in, because I know I've always struggled with how do we make sure the outcome is the value or better, even better than the value we were hoping for as we started a project or a digital transformation, that kind of thing. So before we jump into that, in the chat, if folks are already chiming in where they're joining us from, please do that. We've got a nice international audience here with us today. I'm going to start by having our panelists do a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll get our topic started. Bob Davis, would you kick things off introducing yourself?
You bet. Thank you, Mitch, and it's great to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. I come at this from a vendor perspective. So as CMO of Plutora, I've been involved in helping people deliver software faster for the last 5 years, and Plutora for the last 10. And we really came at the problem from a release management. Our original kind of mantra was being a flight deck for the manual processes that so dominated software development. And as those evolved with the changes with Agile and DevOps, our platform evolved to be one that really sat above and managed a development stream, mostly on the DevOps side, CI/CD, what have you, and voila, that became known as value stream management not long after, through the work of Forrester, and kicked that off, and it's become an industry, and that's where we live as a company in the value stream management space. Also helped start and am a board member on the Value Stream Management Consortium. So I have a perspective of looking at the problem from trying to really solve it in a mainstream way rather than just a promise that it is today.
You're living it. That's great. Appreciate you being here and bringing that perspective. Donald is someone I've known for a while. He's been on other roundtables with us. A return, as I know Bob has been on some things with us, of course, too. Donald, introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm a senior software and cloud architect at Taos. We're a firm that specializes in public cloud. We were ranked #1 by Frost & Sullivan, and I work on various projects to help people digitally transform from the data center to the cloud. So I'm very familiar with this problem. My deep background is really enterprise architecture. So I'm really familiar with how do you get value stream out of the systems you're building.
You're living the dream too. Wow. I think we could probably say for all panelists, I'm guessing. Kaylee, would you jump in next, please? You're on mute, Kaylee. There you go.
Forgot. Thank you. My name is Kaylee Vandyvorty. I'm a software engineer at Change Healthcare. I am on the front lines of this problem, working to make your digital transformations a reality and deliver those value streams. Happy to be here today. So thank you for having me.
Great. I think you're concentrating in the area of HR, right? HR platforms?
Yeah. Health IT, actually.
Okay. Excellent. Great. What a great domain. Boy, talk about combining business value regulation and all kinds of technology and all kinds of challenges. So perfect. And joining us from at least across the pond from where we are from each other, Rupert in London. Rupert, thanks for joining us today. Tell us about yourself.
Absolute pleasure to be here. So as Cody mentioned, I come here kind of representing my company, Duffel Bag Consulting, but also like Bob, I'm part of the Value Stream Management Consortium. So, I'll come back to that. But my background is I started off as a kind of classic management consultant. So please don't hate me for that. But then rapidly found myself doing more and more technology products and projects. And absolutely loving it. And so I've basically never looked back. Since then, and more recently, as I've just mentioned, started to get involved in value stream management. It was already kind of how I'd been working. And so when I saw the Value Stream Management Consortium coming to life, I jumped in to get involved. And I'm now leading the learning value stream for them. So Bob and I have just been in Las Vegas doing our first conference, Flowtopia, talking about a lot of this stuff. Can't wait to get into this conversation.
Yeah, we just had Flowtopia, right? That just happened a week or so ago?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Wow, what timing. Awesome. Excellent. I think we've got everybody. Great. Thanks for those introductions, folks. And I think we can see from the background of everyone, we've got some nice different perspectives. The place I'd like to start, I've sort of learned the hard way multiple times. You'd think I would learn not to make that mistake more than once, but it seems always it's with projects that are driven by wanting to transform something in the business, whether it's a digital transformation or others in the past. Really, the picking the right starting point is critical. And it can really set you up for success or for failure. And it can be anything from the size of what kind of a project you're choosing, or projects if you're doing multiple. It can also be the technology. It can be how it matches with the culture. I mean, you might say, we're all going digital, but nobody uses mobile phones, right? So how do you do that if your culture isn't kind of that type of culture? Bob, I know you have a lot of experience in this area too. I'd love to get your thoughts to kind of kick things off on how do you get started on the right foot, choosing where to start?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's easily the biggest thing we hear. You know, the notion of transforming a development process, which is the space I live in and the perspective I come to this problem with, is a daunting task. And value stream management and really ignoring value stream management, just the notion of getting control of an estate of development that might be spread over geographically large regions, time zones, technologies. I've got older processes happening. I've got very new high-end pipelines coming online. How do I get all this stuff together? And we have people that have spent a lot of money on tools along the way. And the real thing people are saying is, okay, have we gotten any better? And they're looking at it going, well, how do I start to be able to show that? How do I begin to really close the loop on all this stuff? And it's a very difficult problem. What we try to tell people is, well, first of all, start where you are. You don't have to look outside your local area to start. Start where you are and pick a project that you have line of sight to. A lot of the problems that exist in development organizations from the standpoint of getting software out the door exist in external teams or external environments. Those are going to be more difficult to tackle because it's going to require more convincing. So if I can start small in an estate that I control and start to show the value, start to show my wins and celebrate those, I start to get momentum. I start to get wind in my sails, and now I can start to expand. And we see that once that starts to happen, people actually start to ask, hey, can I get involved? So I think, leave it at that for now. We can go on, but I think the bottom line is start where you are, start small, and start with a problem that you have a chance of fixing, and then celebrate that and go from there.
Good. Panel, jump in. Whoever would like to go next.
I'd love to jump in, and then I've got immediately something to throw for Donald because I know he's going to have a view. Completely agree with Bob about starting small, and I think this also touches on the question that's just come in on the Q&A, which is, is it easier to start a transformation in a large organization or a small organization? And the answer is it's always going to be horrible. It's always going to be tough. You're going to have a great time along the way as well, but fundamentally you're going to start small. And so, knowing what you want to achieve from that transformation is absolutely critical if you're going to avoid the kind of pain that Mitch, that you were referencing earlier, where you try and either take on the whole world at once, or you don't quite know where you're going, and therefore you end up getting a bit lost along the way. And so that kind of, in with my background and my experience, and also this is also the VSM's view, so I'm on the right page on this. But it's critical to spend a bit of time with the right people crafting that vision. And this is where I'm going to refer to Donald, because I've seen some absolute car crashes in the past where an organization has looked at wanting to do a transformation, but has made an architectural decision up front, which has caused a significant amount of pain. And I think that's one of the big challenges.
Well, I do see that. I'll actually agree with you. Because at Taos, we have large and small customers, and actually the size isn't relevant. It's more relevant that they've already made, we've committed to using XYZ technology, and now we want to move to event-driven architecture with Kafka, and we don't have the ability to do that. And nobody understands what event-driven architecture is, but we're going to make that choice. And you can't even talk about the business problem because they're already lost in some technical weeds that you then have to wrangle them to make sure they understand what you need to do, and it doesn't matter the size of the organization. Part of the problem is a lot of times the business doesn't work as effectively with the technical organizations. So they're running around, spinning things up in AWS and nobody's even knowing what they're doing. And then they're like, oh, we've gone and done these things. And they're like, oh my God, why did you spend $100,000? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, I completely agree. And then I've also seen it done where you then just start from scratch. Which is sometimes the right decision. But going back to something that Bob said earlier, it's all about, I think it is all about, and I'm struggling to find something to disagree with anyone on so far, but it's all about starting from where you are. And then for me, it's just, develop the situation. And if your organization is so dysfunctional that costs you $100,000, it was probably $100,000 you needed to spend. Yes, you could have done it better and differently, but hindsight is always 20/20, and you're now further along, having learnt lessons, and hopefully you haven't overcommitted down that architectural path in particular. Kaylee, you must have an HR story.
I don't have an HR story, but yeah, I see it all the time as an engineer, even in other engineers. They fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy often. Don't be afraid to start from scratch. Don't be afraid to take a good look at what you've already done and say, actually, this isn't what we need. And start down the path of exploration again.
There's definitely a lot of moving parts, and the moving parts cover a lot of ground. You know, we're talking about the tools and the decisions on how an architecture is made. When we sell, we talk to our customers that they tend to be from global 2000 organizations. Healthcare is a big one. Finance and banking is a big one. Telecommunications is a big one. And those organizations are messy, and they have a lot of legacy systems. They have a tremendous amount of dependencies across a lot of different groups. And they're tasked with this digital transformation. And as somebody said in the Q&A, it's not an option. They have to do this. They have to do this to remain competitive. It's a really competitive environment. You have, small companies knocking off very large organizations in pretty public markets. I give you peer-to-peer banking. Venmo came out of nowhere and basically completely outmaneuvered all the large banks in the world with peer-to-peer banking. And that is, happening everywhere. So it really is a requirement to do it. And I can't enter that kind of a scenario with that broad of a reach and just come in with as much promise as that is. Think about all the places that touches and all the different organizations that are involved and the different cultures, the cultures of development versus the cultures of operations versus the cultures of finance. And getting all those people involved and on the same page, that's the part that people come to us and the blood drains out of their face. It's like, what do and all of those people are screaming, and there's no question that they need to go. So they have to do it. The goals are completely overarching. And when you're sitting in the bowels of that organization and using those tools, and there's so many of them, it's just a massive problem. So I think when you start, you have to, the next thing when you're there is identify your value stream. Identify the project you want to solve. And it's amazing how many people can't do that. Can't look and say, I want to solve this problem. And if it's an HR problem, it's from hire to fire or hire to retire. If it's a development problem, it's from check-in to release or from idea to cash. But do it on a line of sight. That's so critical. And I keep coming back to that because people overlook that and they run into problems right away. Is what we found in the value stream management state of the market is one of the number one problems is getting leadership on board at a level that will sponsor a project that spans that size of an organization. They're just not there yet. So start smaller and prove it to them. That's what you need to do. But have your goals clear, your line of sight to the project, and identify that value stream. I think that's critical.
Bob, what it reminds me of, I don't know if it's the same process today. I used to call it the airline magazine syndrome. Such and so executive comes back from the trip of whatever, vacation, business trip, read something, after looking at the Sky Mall magazine, read some magazine article about cloud native, data center cloud, digital transformation. I got to get me one of those. We need to do this. And it kind of sets the organization off on this, a race for people with no sense of direction, right? Because everybody's going to run everywhere trying to figure out what it is we're supposed to be doing from that executive. So sometimes the sponsorship isn't the right sponsorship, right? It's like, okay, good motivation, good way to get people moving was just not aligned and headed towards a common, at least some common set of goals we can do, in a reasonable time frame and succeed at it. It seems like the other part of it, though, is the people that are really successful at transformations start small, but have a path, a journey that they kind of see the organization unfolding, and then course correct. Of course, as you learn and you go, and let's say you're moving to more digital experiences, you're moving more of your infrastructure to the cloud, or you're doing DevOps or cloud, whatever you're transforming. The end is never the same end you started with in mind. You have to, but having that sort of path that you adjust really is it gives people a sense of where we're going, and then as you need to change, they know why, as opposed to what appears to be completely random decisions by management. Okay, anybody can take me on. You feel free to disagree.
No, I have a couple. I mean, I love the value stream management thing, but one of the things we notice frequently with customers is, one, their staff is not prepared for things like infrastructure as code. They don't have modern CI/CD practices. Their staff isn't up to speed. So a lot of our initial problems are getting them there, whether it's AWS CDK, Terraform. The level of tactical things that we have to take on is very large, because somebody came back from reading that magazine article and said, oh, we want to do multi-cloud, and you guys are going to do multi-cloud, and they have no modern practices. They're used to rack and stack. They have no idea what's cloud native mean. What's a 12-factor app? Why do they talk to these funny terms with us? And you start realizing that none of that makes any sense to them, and their staff, when we start even just talking about, here's how we want to do this, they go, we don't know how to do that. I know how to write a PowerShell script, or I know how to do something else. So then we have the base problem is we can't even get them on the road because they didn't even know where the road is.
And those journeys are going at different speeds, right, Donald? I mean, in a large organization where the CEO might have read that, the traction in the organization is going to occur at different speeds. So now I've got people that are transforming at different levels. Some are really slow and some are really fast. And that really complicates things. So
it completely does. We see it. The technical people are like, we weren't preparing to do this to 2023. And you're like, well, we're in 2022. So I guess we're starting now, and they're like, well, we're not ready for that start. I know our senior management talked to you, but we're not quite there yet.
Well, Dora made that famous with their J curve, right? They said, we can automate this stuff, but then it all backs up because the rest of the organization can't pick up that workload at the same speed that the group that automated is dishing it out. And I'm curious if, Kaylee, if in any transformation that you're going through now is if you see that, is if you see some of the complexities from people transforming at different speeds or handoffs that are getting larger because of that.
Yeah, that's not even just in between business sectors or all throughout the business where you're trying to accomplish that digital transformation. It happens on engineering teams. You'll have people who are just chomping at the bit, ready to learn the latest in cloud native architecture, ready to make that transformation happen. And then you have engineers that are just not quite there yet. They're not ready to climb that mountain. And in order to successfully do that, you need to get everybody on board and working toward the same goal. Otherwise, you'll have wildly varying standards in quality on your product.
Kaylee, what impact did the last couple of years? I assume you were working at home. Maybe you still are. How did that? I mean, we saw that. The move was to, there was a lot of the hype. We're going to go from projects to product teams. We're going to have smaller agile teams. They're going to be smaller and dispersed. We'll have distributed teams, and they'll be very agile, and we'll be excited about that. All of a sudden, they became distributed teammates in distributed teams. You're in the healthcare world where audits and compliance are like breathing. So talk to me about how that all gets balanced from trying to get the work done every day kind of point of view. I'd love to hear that.
Oh man, there's a lot of communication about new protocols and audits. We're working through quite a bit of that right now. We have something new coming down the pipeline that's going to be very challenging. But working from home, I've been doing that the entire time I've been with Change. That's been challenging on a personal and professional level. Professionally speaking, it's difficult to achieve cohesion. You really have to facilitate bonding and communication on your team. Otherwise, what I've seen time and time again are like little engineering cliques. You'll have people, for example, to tie it back to what we were just talking about, you'll have people that are ready and chomping at the bit to pivot to cloud native architecture, and they'll all talk to each other. And then you'll have the engineers that aren't quite there yet, not quite ready, and they'll be talking to each other, and never the two shall meet. They don't really meet each other organically the way that they would in the office. So it's really important to create opportunities for them to influence each other.
I have a question for Rupert and Bob, and this is for my own education too. When we talk about value stream management, well, let me flip it the other way. In the DevOps world, we talk about parallel workflow streams, right? Because this is usually not just one project that's happening on any significant level, on a significant size of a project. You have multiple teams deploying software, using a DevOps and Agile kind of process. How does value stream fit into? I'm assuming we're talking about digital transformation that's larger than just let's just add mobile, interface to our app, where you do have multiple things happening in parallel. And to the point, Bob, you made about different paces, right? They may be happening at different and need to be timed in sequence that way. And I don't mean in a project management standpoint, but how do you map that and make sure the right kind of right value is being created at the right time so the other sequence of steps can be built upon it?
Super challenging, really interesting question. I think, what we're trying to do at the Value Stream Management Consortium is kind of answer that question. And we definitely did not invent Value Stream Management, just for the benefit of everyone on the call. This is something that's come from, the Toyota production system, and then been developed through Lean. And if any of you have read the Phoenix Project, when they're revisiting that physical manufacturing plant and looking at the steps of production, that's exactly where this has come from. And so, what I really love about Value Stream Management platforms like Bob's, and I'm not I'm impartial, but Plutora is a good example of a Value Stream Management platform, is that it gives you the ability to see your entire digital value stream in one place, which means, and I just posted in the chat a whole sequence of comments, which each individually are a step in the Value Stream Management Consortium's implementation roadmap, which starts with your vision, and then organizing around your value streams, and then mapping them, and then connecting them. Now, a Value Stream Management platform effectively means you're jump starting to connect. And you may well, and Donald, I'm sure you're jumping at the bit to jump in here, but if you're already going through that digital transformation, and especially if your organization has been ahead of the curve in terms of adopting ways and practices from the DevOps movement, you're already connecting your digital value streams, and you're probably already getting some visibility, and you're certainly automating it. And that means that the reason that we've kind of started thinking about this in a different way in the last couple of years is that these platforms, Value Stream Management platforms, give you the ability to look at that in real time, which means that then all of your subsequent steps, like your inspection and your adaptation, you've already got that kind of prioritized because you can see where your pain point is. Anyone who's familiar with Goldblatt's The Goal, it's that constant focus on bottlenecks, and it will show you where your bottleneck is, the same way that a good Kanban will show you where your bottleneck is, and it does that in an automated fashion. Now, everything I've just said doesn't answer, and I'm going to throw this at Donald and hope he forgives me, is that bigger picture, how you organize. And Mitch, you said there's a bit of element of project management here and a portfolio management. And I just think CTOs and COOs these days have a hell of a task. making sense of it all.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Since I love domain-driven design. Not everybody's really familiar with what Eric Evans created, but there's a way you can map out bounded context. What is this thing supposed to do? There's a thing called event storming where you map out. Simple example is, this is the one I do at meetups. If you were trying to have a pizza delivery service, start with the final event, pizza delivery, and you map out all the events and just say who the actors are. What triggers this? An event is immutable. You can't, it gets stored wherever it goes. And I've used a lot of those techniques, which are kind of higher level than value stream management. But the problem is trying to get everybody to understand, trying to create that ubiquitous language. Because one of my agile gotchas I'll give it, the reason I do this is I'll see user stories people wrote, but nobody understands what A goes to B means because the words are not defined well in that user story. So nobody has defined the language. So the whole problem is everybody has a different view of what that language is. So getting everybody to agree, you call it. And I even make the developers use that language in their code. So when they look at the code, they can actually show it to people and say, oh, that's what you mean when we increase the tax rate. And that's a real painful thing to do. And, frequently when I've been able to do that at a company I was at years ago, I brought everybody to Pennsylvania and fed them all. So I brought the business and the technologists, put them in a room, and we did a large event storming. And I took all the chairs away so they couldn't sit down, and I fed them. So they had to and lock the door. So they had to go along with it, and it's a hard thing to change. And the goal was to get to value stream, but I was just trying to get to, why do you guys always call this foo? What is foo? I just started. I don't even know what foo is. Can you tell me? And there was 12 answers. I'm like, this is interesting.
I think Mitch, you brought up in the context of your original question here, you brought up the notion of value and how do you keep an eye on the value piece. And one of the things that was very early in the discussions of value stream management is, before we even called it value stream management, we were calling it continuous delivery management originally. But what separated out, a CI/CD discussion or a DevOps discussion or even an agile discussion was this notion of customer experience. And the customer experience, over the last 10 years, maybe longer, but over the last period of time, the customer has become so powerful. When they're buying a product, they've done 75% of the research before they even reach out to the vendor. When they're, they've got very clear ideas of what they're trying to achieve with your product. People will switch banks because they like somebody's mobile app better than another. So the customer, experience has become gold, and that's what drove the notion of value stream management. The value there is ultimately referring to the value that the customer achieves from the product and service that you're trying to deliver, and that's where the goal starts. How do I make that better? And there are tons of other pieces of value. And this is another area that slows people down in the adoption of digital transformation, is what value are they trying to optimize? Are they trying to optimize for the, for the customer's experience with the application? Are they trying to optimize for their revenue? Are they trying to optimize for their cost? Reduce cost? Because ultimately, as you pull those threads, you come to different conclusions. Okay. But what drives the future competitive nature of your organization, the success of your organization, is your ability to capture the value the customer is trying to achieve with your product. That has to be number one. And everything else falls from that. And so, things, all the metrics you choose, the value streams you choose, you've got to keep your eye on the prize. And the prize is what the customer, and they can be internal customers in some value streams. They can be external customers. They can be a lot of different things. But as you define your value stream, you define it from the standpoint of the output, what you're going to have at the end. And then you want to get better at it. I want to get better at it. So I've got to set it up so that I can optimize the value. I've got to instrument it, connect it, if you will, so that I can monitor how well I'm achieving it, and then iterate and get better and adapt, just like Agile always wanted to, and just really drive that, but across the entire value stream, from the notion I've got an idea, maybe it's a customer idea or a market idea, to the time I deliver the value. That's what I got to keep my eye on. And that's the identification of the value stream. And that value is that's how you keep that intact, is you keep that customer experience front and center in your mind.
Perfect. I want to jump on that too. First, we're gonna sort of break the flow just for a minute. I'd love to do a poll. I put a question into the audience on chat, but love to have folks respond here. Are you using value stream management or value stream mapping as part of how you are engaging in your digital transformation today? And if everybody just take a moment, we'll collect some data from our audience. Folks, jump in and respond if you would. Super simple. Just click on an item. There we go. We're getting some responses. They're coming in. I feel like I get to watch the screen. It's kind of like the horse racing, right? And they're rounding the fourth turn, headed into the finish line here. So we'll give it a couple more seconds. Click on that for us. Love to kind of hear where you're coming from as we're having a conversation here. So great. Put that up. And you can still respond. Looks like, folks, I guess I'm not too surprised. Maybe I'd love to get folks' reaction here. Definitely the largest camps around just getting started, considering it. It's not a practice, I'm guessing, that has been sustained for a long period of time yet in most organizations, though we have, 14% is not a small number to sneeze at of folks that are practicing it. So, Rupert, since you work with so many different organizations in your consulting practice, is this pretty representative of what you see? We see more people jumping in with considering it as we leave it open longer.
The overall distribution is representative. If anything, I'd say this audience is probably a bit ahead of the curve in terms of how many are adopting it. Mm-hmm. The way that we're characterizing it is in terms of the adoption curve is we're currently crossing the chasm. So you've got your pioneers who have obviously been trying it out. Then you've got your early adopters, and then you've got your early majority. And so the way we would say it is the early majority are not yet practicing value stream management and using it to make sense of their digital transformations. But I mean, those that are, I think it does provide it provides a dynamic map forwards. In the same way that Wardley mapping is just a phenomenal tool. Love it, because it gives you that true shared situational awareness in terms of what the problems are and how to go around tackling them. One of my biggest gripes at the moment is just this term digital transformation. Like, what is it? Like, when's it finished? What does it mean? It's if you're doing it right, it means something totally unique for your organization. Does it mean you want everything to be digital? Get rid of all humans? Probably not. So how are you deciding how to tackle that whole challenge? And are you moving fast enough to get ahead of the curve, both in terms of your competition, sure, but more interestingly, and again, referencing to what Bob was just saying, like in terms of your customers' experience, because if you're ahead of your customer experience, at the VSMC, we would argue that if you're ahead of your customer experience, you're going to achieve organizational success. And then following that, then you've got all of the great problems that Donald laid out in terms of what are the improvements you need to make, tech stack, how you're approaching your technical debt, which pipelines are you automating, how far do you go? These are all really good questions that are well above my pay grade.
Rupert. I'm going to ask Dom for you to comment on this too. I think one of the things that's easy to forget or easy to overlook is one of the sort of fundamental, variables that we deal with or factors we deal with. And a lot of things have changed in the last 3 years, with COVID and everything and people working from home. But one of the things that's definitely changed is so many more organizations have technology, software specifically, and their ability to deliver software built into their independent in their strategy. So it isn't IT as the back office anymore. It isn't just the automating, screens to enter data, right? Business processes, but it actually is critical to deliver. And I bring this up because now is there's never been a better time than now to connect the dots between what you're doing in your software delivery to the value or the outcome or the digital experience, the customer experience, whatever those metrics or goals are. So you can connect line of sight. Here's what we are doing to get to that point. And that helps with lots of things, funding and other stuff. But at least you can know that you're headed in the right direction and you can course correct appropriately. Donald, I love your thoughts on that too.
Well, I think about this a lot.
Change a lot.
I do. I mean, there's a concept that's out there in the cloud called the landing zone, where a landing zone is where you put your digital transformation, so to speak, and you can do it across. You could have an SAP landing zone, a Kubernetes landing zone. It's the idea of how do you build a well-architected framework in the cloud that allows you to easily do this digital transformation, which is a really complicated process. But you realize that companies don't understand that concept either, because you're trying to put together the platform that allows them to create a value stream. And the idea of platforms is very different with most companies, especially large companies. They think of platform as IIS, using Java versus C#. So when you start talking about platforms, like how do I create this platform when I can easily deploy things, do CI/CD, they don't really have a good understanding of that. And that causes some other very interesting problems. But the other thing I've seen fundamentally is companies are going to the cloud because I have this thing called IT and they don't do what I like. So I want to go to the cloud because I'm going to pay these people and I'm going to pay them enough money. They'll do exactly what I want. It'll work perfectly. And then when that doesn't happen, they get like, wait a minute, I thought if I paid, name the cloud vendor, they would do what I want. Oh, I still have the same people problem with working with a cloud vendor as I had with working with my IT department. I didn't realize that was an issue.
Yeah, that's the magic solution. That's the shiny object syndrome, right? We have the airline magazine.
There's also the point there about support from top management, and we talked a little bit about that. I think, and in adopting any initiative along these lines, it's balancing the day-to-day pressures of the job if you're that CTO or CIO with the long-term promise of what a completed digital transformation would buy you. And it's a little bit like Maslow's law, the promise of some of these platforms. And when we go out and speak of value stream management, I see this, the benefits are very, very significant. They're far reaching across an entire organization. I mean, they're really, really spectacular, but people are looking at that and saying, well, that's great, but I'm over budget this quarter and I've got to drop some expense. So if I pick up this value stream management tool, can I replace some full-time engineers, or can I drop this service, or can I drop that cloud platform and replace it with this to be cheaper? And so you're justifying a long-term nirvana solution on the basis of tomorrow's change that I'm going to save. And it's understandable, but it conspires against actually moving forward. And it's like what Rupert's saying. If you keep the customer in mind and you build around that, the organizational right size naturally, as long as you follow your nose through that transformation. At least that's my view. So I think that's that top management challenge, the opportunity to influence how they see the value. That's, again, start small. So you can start to show the improvement in the value so they can see it. And then, oh, okay, now I get it. That proving out of the value, that's the magic, bean that needs to come into the market. We talked at Flowtopia about what's the Fitbit for value stream management. What's the application that drives it over the edge? And it's really understanding that piece of value that people can understand and internalize. It's not about buying a platform. It's about solving a problem and generating value to the business. We just happen to have a thing that solves that problem.
It's interesting. It's not a cost savings or an automation problem, right? It's a spending money and getting the outcomes we need, the business, the customer, and others need. So I don't want to describe it as insurance, but I want to describe it as we're going to spend a whole lot of money to get something, an outcome, or hopefully get an outcome. We just want it to be in the right ballpark, the right direction, the right thing, the right experience for a customer. I mean, isn't that why you're going to invest in value stream?
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah. But one of the frustrations I have is because I always go back to Conway's Law, which was created in 1968, that the way software is written is driven by the way these organizations communicate. So the problem is digitally transferring organizations that have very ineffective communication structures. Getting the value stream out of that is, if they use rocks and pebbles, they're going to still want to use rocks and pebbles when they digitally transform, because that's the methodology of that corporation, which causes a lot of issues. How do I get value stream? Because I want to show them, oh, by the way, here's a hammer. You could do this thing, but they're not even ready to go there because, well, we always do it this way. And that law has proven to be it's much worse in larger organizations, because moving them is like, we're going to go hunt the T-Rex, but oh my God, there's something bigger than the T-Rex that's going to eat it. Okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's the culture thing. That's real. That's very real. No doubt about it. That's very real.
Interesting.
So here's a controversial position. Should we therefore be spending more money on the business, i.e., ways of working and organization design, rather than on technology?
I'm going to jump in. It's a good question, because whether it's Agile or DevOps or maybe value stream management, digital transformation, so much of this requires higher levels and maybe a significant level of collaboration across the organization, breaking down silos. Those are not easy things. Those things have been there. Those obstacles have been there for a long time, right? And so that's, I think, where the managerial courage is probably going to come into play. Of, we're not going to play those games, and it may also because we've got this shared goal, right? We're headed towards this shared outcome.
Well, and if you adopt that, that's where you really get the value. I mean, one of the things that I remember from one of the early DevOps Enterprise Summit was Jonathan Smart's presentation, where he talked about, you zoom in on this thing where they have a lot of agile processes, and then you zoom out and you find that that's like a month in a 2-year project. So you find yourself stepping over dollars to save pennies by fixing this thing, but not having a view of how you can shrink the entire process. And it isn't just software development. In fact, we had an attendee company that was at Flotopia that 6 months ago chose to completely reorganize how they manage all of their projects, all of their services, all of their products around value streams. They did that in HR, they did that in finance, they did that in all the different groups. The entire company is being instrumented to be flowing on value stream management, and they never even touched development. This was all on the organization. To Donald's point, you start to get that in place. Moving into the digital value stream management world for them would be pretty straightforward, because the concepts and thinking is already set up and driven from the CEO. That's a case where that high-level leadership paved the way to what I think is probably the most digitally transformative company I've run into on the planet. And just for context, they have 140,000 employees. So this isn't a small little organization. This is a global organization. And it was really impressive to see how they had done that. And yeah, there was a lot of headwinds, but getting that level of thinking with the customer delivery in mind starts to get, real good view of where you're inefficient, where you're wasting time, and where you can improve the experience of your customer. And when you do that, you're going to get more efficient. They have. It's amazing. And he had an organizational announcer. They had a reorg while they were at the conference. And he said, you know what? These don't matter anymore, because the flow of the company is all around the value stream. So they can change who they work for all day long. It doesn't change our job. I think that's incredibly powerful. So a glimpse of what you get at the end when you achieve this is a lot of benefit, a lot of success, a lot of win, having that holistic view of what you're trying to deliver to the customer.
Very quickly, I'm going to slightly change tack, and Mitch, do tell me to shut up if we're running out of time. But Kaylee, I'd love to hear. You must have some successful and some pain stories from coming from like the technology side and working with the business. Have you got any standouts?
Questions for Kaylee, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry you cut out and I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat it for me, please?
Absolutely. So we were talking about the challenge of having that conversation between the business and I hate talking about the business and technology because that's just not what we are anymore. We're just one team. But you must have had some challenging and some great conversations. I wonder if you could share one.
Yeah, they're absolutely not separate anymore. Technology and business are hand in hand because that's how a lot of businesses deliver their value now. Let's see, trying to think of a particularly challenging story. I think, give me a few minutes. Let me get back to you on that. Let me put my thoughts together.
If we run out of time, you're welcome to put your thought into chat too.
Okay.
You can do that
Thank
too.
you.
So speaking of timing, I won't tell you to shut up, Rupert, but we are getting towards the end of our time here together. Cody's going to come back in because we do have some gift cards that we're going to give away. So folks, stay tuned because we will let the folks know who our winners are. I'd like to have each of us kind of give our parting thought on if you're going to give someone a takeaway or want them to have this following this conversation. What is your takeaway for how to get started? Back to our original question, how to get started in digital transformation. Rupert, I named you, so you get to respond first.
No worries. How to start? I think just start. I know we've got different people from different levels of from every level of the organization probably on this call. So clearly how you start is going to be different, but it's just get going from wherever you are. Have a think about. I do think that organizing around value streams makes any digital transformation significantly easier, and can help you avoid running headfirst into Conway's Law. So just get started, have conversations. There's a really great book called, terrible title, The Mission, the Men and Me by Pete Blaber. It's not at all about technology, but he talks about really solid leadership principles from every level. And one of those is just shared situational awareness. And another one is develop the situation. And the third one, and this might hook you if you weren't already hooked, but it's called Don't Get Treed by a Chihuahua, which is essentially just another way of harking back to what Bob said. Just get going, make mistakes, learn how to make mistakes faster, and move forwards from there.
Awesome, Donald. I'm gonna call on you next. Then Kaylee, we'll have you jump in and finish with Bob.
Yeah, I think it's the fail faster thing. We actually recently talked to a customer about failing faster was more important than perfection. So we were trying to push things faster. And, a lot of these organizations are used to delivering things in month timeframes. And when you start talking about delivering them in, a day or two, they get very neurotic, like it's like a Seinfeld episode, like Kramer's going to come in and he's going to destroy the dishes or something. So trying to get them go. But one of the other comments, this might be controversial. I've noticed that in large companies, if we work with executive management teams that worked in startups or smaller companies, they are much more efficient than if you work with a large company. Everybody has an MBA because they apply those sort of business principles and they've never built anything themselves. So when you propose some of these things, they always go, well, what do you think? No, you're the expert. I'm like, okay, but you're the expert of your business. But what do you think? So that always baffles me that I don't really understand your business. You do. You have to tell me.
Perfect. I think I've lived that one too. Kaylee, your thoughts, with lots of things we've covered, you don't have to summarize it all, but if there's one sort of, make sure you take this away from our conversation. What would you say?
Your engineering teams get overwhelmed too. And I'd like to reiterate something that Donald already said about domain-driven design. Develop a ubiquitous language. Make sure everyone knows what you're talking about and where you're headed. And your engineers are interested in knowing the broader narrative and your technical goals. Sometimes I've experienced a disconnect between, I guess to circle back to what Rupert asked me already, the biggest gap I've experienced is not understanding at all where we're headed technically, because nobody understands what the product is. The product requirements haven't been defined necessarily. And then your engineers just sit around with, nothing to do, wondering what to do next. So that would be my advice.
Without a plan, any road will get you there, wherever there is, right? Bob, parting thoughts for you.
Look, the most important word there is value in my perspective. Keep value front and center in your brain. As you adopt your transformation, show value every step of the way. Understand what goals you're trying to achieve and show that the value and grow out from there. The more value you show, the more cred you will have in the business, and the more influence you will have as your value stream evolution stretches outside of your organization. You're going to need that level of confidence and proof point to be able to explain the value. And without that, you're going to run into trouble. So value, keep value in your brain, understand what you're trying to deliver, and document how you can improve it to the organization.
Fantastic. I'll just throw in my 2 cents. Like Agile, like DevOps, even cloud native, it isn't just a technology or a tool. I mean, I go to the people who I think I trust the most in terms of their expertise, their experiences, the Bob, the Ruperts, the Kayleys, the Donalds of the world. Those are the people who I go to. And if they're also someone who I get consulting from or a product from, that tends to be who I like to work with, because then I know it isn't just the tool that's getting me. Really, it's that knowledge base and that's being invested into the technology I'm using. And I want to gain from their experience. So my compliments and thanks to all of you on the panel for participating today and sharing what you did. And I hope our audience got a lot from it. I know I did. So thank you, Kayley, Donald, Bob, and Rupert. I'm going to turn it back to Cody to impart some last bit of knowledge that we all want to hear.
Well, thank you, Mitch. And I express the same thanks to Kaylee, Donald, Rupert, and Bob. I really appreciate everyone coming together for this conversation today. So to our 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift cards, they are Heather L., Tara or Tara J., Alberto C., and Leonard A. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Please keep an eye on your email inbox to claim that gift card. But if you don't happen to see that email, do please check your spam folder. I'd also like to remind everyone that this session was recorded. So maybe you're not here, you had to leave early, or maybe you're here now and you joined us late. You should be receiving an email with a link to access this recording on demand. Or as always, you can find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. So that is all I've got for everyone today. Before we close out, I just wanted to also ask our audience to fill out this survey that will pop up on your screen as soon as we close out. We do keep track of these surveys and we want your feedback, so please do send that in. Otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and to our panel, thank you once more.
Thank you.